Hey everyone, welcome to day 2 of e-learning. Hopefully it's smoother than day 1, which is fairly inexcusable. And I apologize with all your frustrations with Schoology. Believe me, no one was more frustrated than me. There's no excuse. They should have been able to predict hundreds of thousands of students would be accessing their server, so I would hope they would have compensated. They didn't, I guess, so hopefully that gets a little smoother. The quote for today is related to your journals from yesterday from Len Nyhoff. If we view ourselves as besieged victims who need to go into hiding, then we will cultivate fear and hoarding. If we view ourselves as a community working hard to protect the most vulnerable among us, then we will cultivate courage and helping. And a lot of you commented on this. A lot of you were frustrated with the people who are collecting toilet paper or things that don't seem to make sense, but yet we also had people who are doing really good. So I think a lot of you really touched on this in your journals, and I was impressed by your honesty. All right, pretty simple agenda. We're going to talk briefly about the purpose of writing. You're going to read a letter from Nelson Mandela from prison and write a sample letter to someone. All right. Before we get into that, I want to make sure you look for the comments I made on your journals. I wrote and responded to 94 journals yesterday, so I read a lot. And I commented in the grade book. That's where the comments are. So look where the assignment is, where it says 3 points or 3 out of 3, and then there's a comment. That's where you're going to find my comments, because those were the best way to make sure they only went to you. So please take a look. I spent a lot of time on that today. All right, why do we learn to write? This is the real reason, and I say this as someone speaking from someone in society, not as a teacher, but we have resumes and letters of interest. You're all going to want a job someday. And in fact, one of my friends, very, very good friends, is applying for a job at Valley. And he had to write a letter of interest to even get an interview. And they had to look at it and read it and say, oh, this person, they sound like they legitimately want this job. And they wrote well enough. We'll give them an interview. Emails and communications, they are first impressions. We talked about this. If your email to sent to someone for something that you want, if it's full of mistakes or it's written poorly, they may never ever get back to you because it's an impression. Government or official forms. I'm actually a part of a lawsuit right now that is related to my cancer last year, and that requires writing. That's actually quality and of value to whoever reads it. It's not just scribbles and random thoughts. Here's Bettini's perspective: is reading allows you to feel superior to other people whose writing is not as good. And I guess that's true. It allows you to remember things, and even more importantly, writing, and this is where we're going to focus today, it helps you process what's going on. This is a crazy time. And writing will help you not only document it and record it, but it'll help you work through some of the things that make this very uncertain. So people write when times are hard. They just do. There's a whole genre of it. In fact, here's one example. This is a woman named Nella Last, and she wrote a series of diaries for almost 30 years about her experiences in wartime, World War II to be specific, in England. And she kind of captured what life was like for ordinary families. And she wrote this: I can never understand how the scribbles of such an ordinary person can possibly have value. Well, they do. They actually captured history, and they were published in this book. So they really do matter. All right. So you're going to read a little bit today. So I have a letter that Nelson Mandela wrote to his daughters from prison. And a little bit of background: if you don't know who Nelson Mandela is, do some research. The guy is amazing. He spent 27 years in prison basically because he opposed a policy of racism. It was called apartheid, and it was in South Africa. And basically, apartheid is whites in power, blacks are not. Whites are separate, blacks are separate. And he opposed it. And so they put him in prison for essentially being a traitor to the state. And he spent 27 years in prison in horrible conditions. He could barely write, he could barely meet with anyone. And it was a hard labor experience for him. So that is the first thing I want you to do, is read his letter to his daughters, and it's right here in this document. It's not that long, it's pretty short, and I want you to read it. I don't want you to skim it. I want you to read it. It won't take you long. It's got value. Now, back to this. So after you read that, then you're going to do something else for me. I would like you to actually open up another Google Doc and write your own letter, just like Nelson Mandela's. And I want you to write to someone currently not living with you and that you haven't seen much of or heard from about your daily life as we shelter in place. This is someone who's in isolation just like you are. And this is sort of trying to get into that same mindset that Nelson Mandela was. He was in prison, his loved ones were not. You're not in prison, but you are isolated. So what do you write about? Well, write about tiny details and daily habits. Include events of importance that only a reader might understand. I want at least 5 paragraphs, and I want you to start and end your letter just like Mandela. This is how I know you read the letter. If your letter looks like Mandela's, then I know that you actually read it. Do not submit this assignment. Just write the thoughtful letter and feel free to use it if you want to send it to your loved one. But do not submit this because, and this is an example of it, this will be a document you will continue to add throughout the week. All right. So this is the first letter to someone. Okay. Then we'll add 2 more as the week goes on. But do not submit this and use this document so I can look in and see what you've written. Don't start a new document. All right. So summary, this is day 2. There's the examples. That's the letter that you're going to read. And this is where you write your sample of writing from isolation in the style of Nelson Mandela's. Again, I'll know if you read it by how you write yours. And then there's just the presentation that you're looking at without me. And then here will be the video version that I'm doing right now. So hopefully today is smoother than yesterday, but we'll have to find out. So take care, and we'll see you again tomorrow.